Welcome in episode 4 of the still currently untitled Blood Bowl podcast. I'm just going to keep it untitled as long as I can until our amazing editor Scott forces a title upon us.
I
Uh,
think I think a title will emerge naturally at some point, right?
I
There'll be
yeah,
some sort of cataclysmic event that after which we'll say this is the title that feels
yes, yeah. Maybe we'll be the Treeman Foul podcast.
correct. Turn 16 tree men fell.
No, turn one.
Turn
It's
one
got to
tree
be
men fell.
early. The early Treeman Foul is where it really sticks out.
Yeah, I believe we established at some point in the past that the more strength the model has, the better they are at fouling. They have more mass to bring down on the model on the target.
And I feel like that's the Death Roller logic.
Yeah, it is the death roll.
So, yeah, we're here for our fourth episode recapping our week 3 games. I think we have the duality of coaches here this week
Yeah,
giving our recaps.
Yeah, we sure do. We've got a discussion piece that we're going to center on big guys later on. It's worth kind of talking about them. We mentioned the big guy arms race last week, and the first couple of armaments have been created so far. So we'll chat about big guys, how to take advantage of their power, and how to navigate their downsides.
Yeah. Before we get to that, though, we've got a whole week's worth of games to talk about. We can start with our own. So I played against the Wood Elf team, the V Stars. What a theme picked out for Mike. So that was a 2-1 win for me. That was a really just came down to a numbers game, exactly how you want a Dwarf game to look most of the time. Just quick scoring from the Wood Elves on the first kickoff that they received led to a grind out most of the half score on turn 8 and received and scored super late before, after the Wood Elves were able to do anything. Um, that first drive, nothing really happened, not many armor breaks. And then as soon as the second drive started, the casualties started piling up and it just became a numbers game very quickly.
Yeah, if you could choose the way that for that game to play out, you might want like your casualties earlier in the game, but you're not really going to complain with the outcome in that situation where, you got your bodies later on. You're happy with that for sure.
Yeah.
My game was the opposite score. I lost 2-1 to the Jolly Rotters. I was a little worried about the mummies going into the game just because mighty blow, no downside. It's not like an ogre or a troll where sometimes they might just not activate. The mummies are always going to be a threat. Uh, and honestly, my luck in the game, I hate to like pin it on that, but it's very difficult to win a game when you roll 4 double skulls and you break armor only 4 times. It's hard to get anything going in that instance. And so I couldn't stop the undead from stalling in the second half, not really effectively. I had a really bad double skull with the Bloodspawn. This was like the Bloodspawn's worst game that I've had in a while. And honestly, I was expecting the Bloodspawn to kind of behave this way at some point or another during the season. But the double skulls from the Bloodspawn was just absolutely brutal in the second half, where if he had done what was supposed to do, I could have ended up like facing the ball carrier with like a Bloodseeker or whatever. But my team got beat up. I had a Corn Gore die, which was not great. I'll cover that more in detail in the in memoriam section. I did have a chance to tie the game up, but at that point, I rolled my fourth double skull on the blitz I needed to try to free open my piece to go score, and that sealed the game at that point.
Yeah. And the potential of the double skull being such a frenzy heavy team was a factor that you took into consideration when you were building your initial roster, kind of going heavier on the rerolls, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I really wanted to start with 3 rerolls because it wasn't even double skull; it was skull both down. Right, that's about a 1 in 9 for a skull and both skull and a both down to appear. Double skulls is a 1 in 36, obviously. At this point, 3 of my 3 games, I have rolled more double skulls each game. I have rolled a total of 9 double skulls in 3 games. And I think as far as skull both down, I think I've rolled that like twice. So It's pretty funny how you can plan for disaster and things can go even more wrong than that in a game. So
Yeah. Going back to some of the other games, looking at the Dead Man's Hand division, one of the things we talked a little bit about last week was the matchup between the humans and the Norse. GG's of Electric City, Might of Asgard. Also able to pull that out with a 2-0 win with a 3 casualty lead over humans.
yeah, when I talked to Chris after the game, he mentioned he was like the game kind of went the way that you possibly predicted it could have. Apparently, Austin got his licks in early in the game, and at that point, when you've got similar stats and similar skills, but you're down on people, that's just a hard deficit to overcome. So
Next matchup in this division is Halfling Justice and the Imperial City Retainers. Halfling and Skaven. If you want a more in-depth read on this, we actually do have some content going up over for this. Fred, the coach of the Retainers, is doing sort of match reports, and so we got those over on our Substack. If you want to read a more in-depth look at that game from one of the coaches' perspectives.
yeah, and I think Fred did fairly respectably in that match. He lost it 1-0. Uh, I was kind of expecting like a high flying shootout just because Griff and Halflings can put points on the board. Skaven are good at putting stuff on the board. Not entirely sure how the game played out, but that's what the Substack's there for. So, go
Yeah,
check it out from Fred's point of view.
yeah, absolutely. Looking at the summary of the game, kind of watching it live as Torplay was updating. It
I didn't know where it was going to go.
Yeah, it looked like it was gonna start out really poorly for the Skaven. It started to even up a little bit, and then it was just anyone's game from there, just from looking at the stat lines. So
Yeah. So when you're watching a game in tour play and you know who went first, and when you get to halftime and you see that neither player scored, that's one of those. I'm like, oh, somebody's in trouble. Like you are probably way behind in that game if you received the ball initially and you did not score on your opening drive. That's when your team is at its most powerful. And so if you can't convert that into a touchdown, then some stuff has gone wrong in the game. And you might even find yourself in a position where you are lucky that the opponent didn't take the ball from you and score. So it looked like there was quite a few halflings that got chewed through during the game. So yeah, uh, uh, way closer match than I would have necessarily anticipated.
mhm.
So
Yeah. Another matchup we were looking at last week for this week was the Dark Elves and the Chaos Dwarves. 1-0 win for the Chaos Dwarves. Fairly uneventful game.
yeah, as far as tour play ticker
Yeah.
goes, there was just a couple of updates in the game. It looked like both players played solid fundamental Blood Bowl, played a lot of keep away, got into some scrums, but nothing turned into devastation for either side.
Yeah. Could have been some knockouts we don't see. Those obviously don't get recorded on tour play.
Yeah,
But
that's all. That's usually the story of tour play in those games where you're not really sure what has occurred. Is that there were some key knockouts that happened.
we have another tie, as seen as a tradition for Dead Man's Hand, Rotten Peaches, and Of Salesman, Amazon, Black Orc. Tied it up. Uh, the game of Bash versus Finesse.
Yeah, yeah. I think both people there are probably happy with the tie. Jurgen and John obviously usually finish towards the top of the standings. So whenever you play against someone who's got a pretty good pedigree of Blood Bowl, you are you'll walk away from the game happy with a tie. Sometimes you're like, well, I probably could have gotten a win here if I'd done just a couple things different, or if dice fell my way. But yeah, I think both people will be happy with the tie.
Yeah. Last game for this division. Uh, Return to Monkey. 2-1 over Teal Terror in a suspiciously bloodless affair for the Ogre team.
Yeah, I actually think this is. one of the more likely outcomes for ogres versus elves, especially the sturdier elf teams, high elves or dark elves, the ones that have a lot of 8 armor. The If the elf player is playing smart, they'll keep their people away from the ogres and try to keep them from being blasted. And if the ogres only get one hit a turn, and right now the ogres don't have a whole lot of skills, so yeah, the if the ogre rolls push skull or both down and a push, you're not going to put your ogre on the ground just to try to take a chance on an elf.
Yeah, that was a game that was actually happening at the same time that I was playing mine, and afterwards, Sean was talking about that he feels he's got some casualties banked up for some unfortunate opponent in the future.
I kind of feel that way too. My Bloodspawn has 2 casualties through 3 games. I empathize with him there. I mean, my guy's got claws and mighty blow. And I think the Bloodspawn broke armor twice in the game that I played. Now I'm playing this upcoming week. I'm playing against Skaven, so the claws isn't even really at its best against Skaven. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
So looking over to the Snake Eyes division, TVD Shaming Undead takes the game 1-0 over the Sleesacks, and the storyline I cared most about going into this week, our streak of skin casualties has unfortunately come to an end.
Yeah, that's a shame. I love it. I love those random factoids. Those are some great sports factoids. But yeah, the we have to go back. We have to put our days without a skink casualty counter back to 0. Start the count all over again.
Yeah. It was a bit of a bounce back game for Shaming Undead after losing a couple players. So nice to see him be able to get back on the scoreboard. He has a couple points for the leaderboard. The Gnome Goblin game. I think
Yeah,
that has become our choice for game of the week.
yeah. So now I believe I said on the past podcast that you could have 10 injuries in the game and that wouldn't be like weird. This game, in fact, had 13 injuries. And who knows how many KOs, because once again, that's not recorded in tour play. And I know the final score was 3-1. I actually got to watch a bit of this game because it was happening right before I was going to clock in on Saturday. And this was a classic stunty game. Occasionally, you'll have stunty games where nobody can roll anything, and then you'll have stunty games where everybody can roll. And this was one where both people, every time they touched a model, would roll a splash, and a good chunk of the time it resulted in armor breaks. So there was a free flowing of blood on this pitch during the course of the game. And there were a little bit of like fox heroics on the gnome side to win the game. And at one point, the game was tied 1-1. Warren and the Goblins got a 1 turn touchdown, which is always fun with Goblins because the troll is pretty likely to eat the model. So it's funny when a troll actually does what he's supposed to do. And so at that point, when it was 1-1, I believe Will's gnomes had 6 models on the pitch, and I thought for sure he was going to just have 2 treemen by the end of the game. But the goblins started doing some goofy stuff in the second round, and the gnomes had just enough in the tank to sneak out a couple of touchdowns to secure the victory over the goblin team. That one looked like a wacky, crazy game for sure.
Kind of the reason we play the game in the first place to get those wacky things. Turn
Yeah.
one touchdowns, Fox heroics, all those fun little bits.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's nice to see like Stunty pay off for that. Like Stunty, obviously you're playing with players a little bit underpowered, but got some sort of wacky combination of skills up their sleeve to do something.
Yeah. And it's one of those weird things where like I watched one block happen, and the goblin rolled skull both down, and Warren opted not to re-roll it. And Will just didn't want to take a chance on the armor break. He could have ended the turn, but he opted to wrestle with a gnome just to keep his guy alive. Because of the way the dice had been rolling, it was likely that his gnome was going to explode.
Mhm.
So there were a lot of like those micro decisions with stunties to make in that game. Yeah, and then on the next turn, the gnome passes his jump up roll to block somebody and just like KOs a goblin. So it was just it was like I said, it was wild. If anybody's wondering where the splashes are when they're throwing blocks later on, it's because they were all in this game.
Okay, Plague of Gods, Tomb Kings losing 0-1 to the Black Orcs. Tournament. Dodge this. I didn't get to see this game, but it seems just like it might have just been a kind of muscle.
Yeah, there were two star players taken. The Black Orc team went with Bomber, which I think is a really good pick into Tomb Kings. You've got very bad agility and low movement pieces, and bombs are incredible against teams that can't catch and can't move, because that means you get to play a huge positional game, and the bombs are just a menace the whole time. And there's not enough necessarily speed. And you could kind of put a wall of black works between Bomber and the mummies here, and Bomber will just wreak havoc the whole game, provided you don't roll once.
Yeah. Okay, next game we got Bad Moon Rising. Odd to say that a team that started out the season 2-0 needed a bounce back game, but it was a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Taking the game 2-1 over the ROUS. Chromatic Core definitely needs to catch up in terms of SPP with losing 26.
Yeah, and it looked to be kind of the Skaven got beat up in that game. I think there were four casualties. And so, yeah, I think the Skaven were just running for their lives the whole game. They got a touchdown in there, but Necromantic after that, I think just kind of handled business. Skaven scored early, which is usually uh, back when Shane would comment on Blood Bowl games. He would talk about how if you saw Jim's opponent score first, you knew Jim was going to win the game 2-1. And that's one of those classic things where you go look at the ticker, Juan scores first, and sure enough, Jim pulls out the game 2-1.
Seems very against a player that's going to play in such a methodical and deliberate way as Jim. It's going to be a challenge to stop him from scoring. So it's tempting to get your score in when you can, but then if you leave him the time, he's gonna put that 2-1 on you.
Yeah. So with Necro, I'm not saying this is a guaranteed path to victory for anybody who plays against Jim moving forward. Honestly, giving Necro the ball first and forcing them to play, it's really hard to play offense with Necro effectively, in my opinion. You could probably force Necro to score really fast just because they only have so many ball carriers on the team. And I don't know that Jim's team has enough money to afford all of the ghouls and werewolves now, especially that a werewolf died. In a couple of games, that may not be the case, but right now, if he's only got a handful of people who can carry the ball, it can be really hard to play offense with that because the rest of the team is so slow and defensive. The flesh golems, the zombies, uh, the wraiths do a pretty good job of providing some cover as you're moving down the field, but the flesh golems and zombies can often end up lagging behind your guys who are trying to move the ball. And the guys you're trying to move the ball with are the people you don't actually want to get hit, right? You flesh golems and zombies, you're fine getting punched all day on Necro, but ghouls and werewolves, you have to live in complete terror of them getting something happening to them and sending your team far back.
Yeah. Zero luck chucks. The luck might have run out.
Sorta,
Yeah, in a sense,
yeah.
but uh, losing 1-2 to the Electric City Maulers. That might have just been punishment for the leader,
Could have been, yeah.
honestly.
Could have been. Who knows how the game played out? I didn't get a chance to watch that one. I think the one of the more notable things about the game was that the Zero Luck Chucks hit a six on the Eileen Andar journeyman that they took. And so that team had a lineman with tackle and strip ball added to the team, which is a disgusting addition to a team without having to get like the SPP for it. That's just a really good free player to have. Sure, you could get greedy and you could want wrestle or you could want block, but tackle and strip ball is a very good start to a player who really only needs block at that point to be super effective. And you could choose block or wrestle, and I'm not going to say either decision is wrong. And some players are going to like wrestle for this because this is just a crazy ball hawk character, right? Um, two die uphill with this character with tackle and strip ball um, is once you add wrestle into the mix, you are very likely to pop that ball loose. You just got to avoid a skull. So, what a crazy character to get.
Yeah.
Even though you lost the game 2-1, I feel like your prospects for the rest of the season are got to look way up.
Yeah. Definitely worth that investment of 100K to get that player. Last game in the division is the first tie for the Snake Eyes, Gnarly Oaks, and the Southern California Trojans. Government tied 2 scores each. Did not get to watch this game either. So,
This one ended right before I showed up. The gnome and the goblin game was going on. Started like slightly after this one. So, but this one looked like a pretty entertaining game for sure. Lots of blows back and forth. Both the dwarves went down in the game. Normally, on the like the uh, gnarly oaks, the dwarf players are going to be like some of the sturdier, right? They start with block both. And in this instance, the Blitzer also got, the Blitzer has 10 armor. So the elves being able to crack 2 dwarves off the pitch, you got to feel pretty good about that.
yeah. Yeah. It seems like, given the start of the Trojans this season, it draws an upswing. So maybe some momentum gained there over the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think Sean is one of those players you're happy with a tie against. Previous league champion there. And so drawing a game with him feels pretty good. So.
Yeah. That wraps up all our games for week 3. We'll do our quick in memoriam segment. Not quite as much death this week.
Yeah, between this week and last week, we almost have an entire dead Blood Bowl team. I'm not sure how many people died in the uh, first week, but we probably have an entire Blood Bowl team worth of death at this point. That's always one of the funny thought exercises at the end of the league is, could you win the league with only the players that died during the week?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing. This past weekend, I was in Savannah, Georgia for a weekend, doing a little mini vacation, and they were talking about the city famously being built on the dead. And it seems much like this season is the same way. So this week we have to say goodbye to Zingox, the Korngor for
Yeah.
Slaughterhouse 11.
Yeah, he died like an idiot. He threw a 1 die block, fighting a zombie, rolled a skull, and died, and then came back as a zombie. Oh.
Not the only player to come back to zombie this week. Also, the Dread Pirate Roberts,
Yeah.
ROUS's Blitzer.
Yeah, once again, another player dying versus an undead team, and then it being resurrected as a zombie. Just to taunt you.
Yeah, it's gonna stay there for hopefully stay there. It seems good etiquette to keep that player on
Yeah.
your team as long as you can. And our last death, Ginger Zebex, Goblin lineman for the Blood Moon Gang, seeming the most likely player of alignment to die.
Yeah, and I think the way the math works out on stunties is that they're like it's counterintuitive. Stunties are more likely to get hurt, but they're slightly less likely to die overall because KOs and the badly hurt expand the chart. There's a good chance that they're taken off the pitch and they're not put back on the pitch to get more hits. So they're like taken off the pitch with like badly hurt, and so that means they survive for another game. And in this instance, this I believe this goblin was smashed by a tree, just completely splattered.
It seems like a very bad power matchup for
Yeah, it's
to the goblin
right, right.
industry.
Yeah, when actually, I mean, we're on the verge of getting into the Blood Bowl big guy discussion, but yeah, like putting putting a goblin on a tree is one of those I don't really want the tree to move anywhere kind of moves. And of course, there's a chance that the tree just splatters my goblin, and before the tree ends up with a block, it's not as bad as it might seem on intellectually. Like on paper, it's you're way safer than it necessarily looks like. But if things go wrong, they're way more likely to go wrong.
Right. Yeah, that wraps up our week three, pretty much going into week four. As Lynn said earlier, we are talking about the big guy arms race a little bit. We've got our first two players, two big guys to get skills. One of the gnomes tree men got block, and then one of the trolls for the Blood Moon Gang, the Goblin team, got row.
Right. So conventional wisdom says you most likely want to take block first. However, if Warren's game plan is to throw teammate, then pro helps you with that quite a bit. Um, and my understanding was in that game that the trolls were about 50% stupid. The trolls really messed up in that game. And so I think when Warren was in the position to win that game, the trolls kind of squandered it because they just weren't really listening to the rest of the team. Crow is a very good skill on a big guy because it gives you free rerolls. You don't have to waste team rerolls and you don't have to launch rerolls into loner with a chance for them to fail. So I'm not going to fault Warren for taking pro. Uh, we have even had discussions when building tournament lists, especially ones where there's limits on the number of skills you can take, whether we want block on a big guy or whether we would rather have pro. And I think it's going to depend on the big guy. Now, if you want your big guy to punch, you got to have block. But if you want your big guy to do stuff and you want it to do it more reliably, pro is a really big benefit for that.
Yeah, and we wanted to talk a little bit, dive more into it this week, especially because so many big guys in the league right now are on the precipice of getting those first skills. A lot of people with 6, 8, 10 star player points. A lot of
Oh,
times you're going for that 12-point threshold to get your secondary skill first. Most of them can only take general and secondary. So we've got a lot of people that are probably within the next week or so we're going to see a lot of players getting those skills.
yeah, and way more discipline this time around in the league. And leagues past, there have been a lot of, especially newer players, will hit that six, feel the itch. They may go a game without the big guy getting a skill, and then they feel like they got to take a skill. So they'll take like a juggernaut or a guard or something. They'll they'll get itchy, and then they'll kind of jump the gun and take a skill that they were probably still better off waiting for block for. So we're right on that precipice. At this point, only the people who've crossed the threshold have taken skills. And so like my blood spawn is sitting on 10. It fortunately got two MVPs. I know when I was looking at Juan's roster, because we're squaring off, his Rat Ogre's sitting at 10. He's got a casualty and two MVPs. There's a lot of big guys in that category of you got a little lucky, you managed to get two MVPs on them in 3 games, and maybe they got a casualty here or there. So they're right there. They're fixing to get way more scary. And yeah, I mean the league is going to get a lot more the big guys are going to get more consistently damaging once block starts getting peppered around.
For sure. So yeah, we want to dive in a little bit and take a little bit deeper dive into some of the big guys. Like, what are your overarching thoughts on? Obviously, you're playing a team with a big guy this season. My team theoretically could take a big guy. Foregoing it for now, at least. Last season played with the death roller for the dwarf team. But like, what are your thoughts when it comes to your big guy experience?
Yeah, so uh, I actually swore off of big guys for a couple of seasons because I had such a disastrous experience with the Yeti on the Norse team. So after playing Norse, the first game I played with the Yeti, it spent the first three turns rolling ones on Unchanneled Fury. Uh, the first block that it threw was a skull both down that it failed the loner check on. And then later in the game, it rolled double skulls when I needed a just a push. It rolled double skulls, and I was out of rerolls at that point, and the Yeti fell over and died. So this was about as bad of a game as you could possibly ask from a big guy, and I lost that game 1-0. And I was like, if I hadn't taken this Yeti, I would have won this game, or at the very least tied it. Because my opponent was able to, the big guy, like big guys have a large cost associated with them, and this is not just money, right? Big guys are over 100K in every possible category for every team. They're going to cost you more than 100K. The cheap ones are going to be like 110, 120. The more expensive ones are going to be in the 140, 150, 160 range. So that's a chunk of team value that's wrapped up in them. Another cost that they have is the negative traits. You have to play around that, right? They're not reliable in a game. I find myself, whenever I'm playing a big guy, having to use the big guy and thinking to myself, man, it's going to really suck if he doesn't do what I need him to do here. And yeah, they backfire so often. Um, so the stunty teams can kind of navigate it a little bit because a lot of those teams don't have loners on their big guys. None of the ogres on the ogre team have loner. None of the trees on either gnomes or uh, halflings have to worry about loner. They still have downsides, but you at least could use team rerolls on them. So yeah, I mean the upside to the big guys is that once you've invested in them, they go kind of crazy. I mean, the Chaos Dwarf Minotaur has changed, but a Chaos Dwarf Minotaur that's really developed, that's in like the block pro claws territory after like its second season or something like that, that's a terrifying big guy. It'll just punch a big hole in your squad. You have to constantly worry about it. Who is it going to hit on this turn? That's stuff that they have like an outsized impact on the board. I think a lot of experienced players can mitigate them by putting models that they don't care if they die near them. I think that's usually the best strategy. That's what I employ against like tree men and stuff like that is or trolls because they can't just like go where they want on the field. So just giving them alignment or whatever to punch until that alignment is dead, and then giving them another alignment to punch. That's a good way to kind of keep them where you want them on a pitch. But that is going to run like kind of a, you know, you might run out of resources at some point if the opponent starts rolling hot.
Yeah, yeah. Especially with your Yeti story, I feel like a lot of people who have played with big guys, I would dare say everyone has their horror story, at least one of a game. I know my big guy horror story was the season I was playing Nurgle and had a rot spawn that went really stupid on turn three, was stupid through the rest of the half. Um, and on turn nine, went for a blitz. It was just a position where the ball carrier had gotten to where I could put a blitz on it. And I was like, okay, I'll take a shot. This is going to be a 3-die block if I can get it. Path's really stupid. Go to make the block, roll triple skulls, fail the loner, fall down, and then stay stupid for two more turns to stand up. So over half the game spent
Yeah.
doing nothing except having disturbing presence,
Right.
which was not relevant in that game at all. So that's definitely like the mitigating. That's definitely the thing is when you're looking at the big guy, it's kind of having that fear going from Spawn, playing with some of the other ones like ogres. It feels a little bit better. Bonehead feels better than really stupid, but those negative traits do have a bearing on your game plan. Like for
Yeah.
you, how much does that affect how you evaluate your big guys? Because you have the different traits, you have animal savagery, unchanneled fury, bonehead, really stupid. How do those sort of rank in your
Yeah. So,
evaluation?
so I do think really stupid is the worst of the traits. It's the least reliable, and it's also very punishing when it goes wrong. I think when you lose your tackle zones on a big guy, that's really bad, right? Especially somebody like the rot spawn who's got tentacles, right? Like you are very happy if the rot spawn doesn't even throw a punch in a game if it just keeps people corralled that you don't want wandering off, right? Trolls, I think, are one of the funniest, really stupid models because they also have always hungry, right? So, you've got double downsides if you're trying to throw teammate with them. But trolls are cheap and trolls are durable. They've got regenerate. So, I do think the really stupid pieces have enough of an upside to them to justify how bad really stupid can be. And usually those guys are the cheapest of the big guys. I like Bonehead. I usually can work around Bonehead a little bit easier than some of the other bad traits. I like being able to reposition models with Bonehead. Both the Croxagore and Ogre are both they're very solid pieces to just, especially against like agility teams, being able to like park them where you want them, use them as an anchor. You have to be careful about activating them because if they do bonehead, they'll leave like a huge gap in your defense that like elves could just run through. But I think ultimately bonehead is one of the more tolerable ones. And the playing against the ogre teams is it's really funny when multiple ogres bonehead all in the same turn. That seems to be the case. It's never that like the ogre team has a ogre bonehead once a turn. It's always all of the ogres activate or all of the ogres are boneheaded. That's been my experience playing against the team. So that's just like really funny. I think animal savagery is obviously the one that is the most reliable, but man, it's got a bad drawback, right? Animal savagery. I have seen animal savagery kill opposing players, and that's devastating. When you go to activate one of your models and you lose a model, that's bonkers. Now, obviously, I've been playing with Unchanneled Fury on the Bloodspawn, and the upside to Unchanneled Fury is that you never lose your tackle zone. So uh, I will often, if I'm going to do something with the Bloodspawn, I will try to do it early, so that way I can reposition the rest of the team if the Bloodspawn doesn't do what he needs to do. There's also an argument to activate the Bloodspawn last after I've repositioned the rest of the team, so it doesn't matter what he does. Like those are the kind of the two ways to tackle it. In instances where the upside outweighs the downside of him not doing his thing, I'll go for him first. And on the instances where the downside is worse, like if he completely bungles the turn, I will reposition my team carefully so that way when he bungles it, it's fine. So yeah, and you've also got like Bloodlust on the Vargeist, which I could I could devote an entire podcast to Bloodlust after playing a season with vampires. But Bloodlust is very similar to Animal Savagery. But it obviously has slightly more of a downside because it can just like straight up end your turn if you don't position correctly. So if I'm ranking them, it's probably something like Animal Savagery, Bonehead, On Channel Fury, and then Really Stupid. Something along those something along those lines. With Bloodlust as a asterisk off to the side.
Right. Yeah. Definitely, I think is like that was a aspect of the Death Roller I enjoyed as a big guy was not having an activation requirement to start. Like he was always a piece that was valid to move. Of course, you only have him for a drive.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
Secret
gonna say
weapon being the biggest drawback.
exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say Secret Weapon, that's on the pump wagons as well. It's on the Death Roller. So it is a negative thing, but it doesn't change the way the model functions during a turn. It just changes the way players will play because it does incentivize your opponent instead of stalling to just put the ball in and get the Death Roller off the pitch.
Mhm. Yeah. One other downside to that too, I think, from a developmental standpoint, at least playing with it last season, was it really came down to just being lucky with MVPs to get block because you're only playing one drive unless you have a bribe or you're able to spike the six on arguing the call. And that was a big thing, was just like, how do I get blocks? Not having block, luckily it has Juggernaut, so you can mitigate some of that. Also, strength seven, you're throwing three die blocks. But a lot of the times I found myself in a position where you're trying to, there's a blitz you need to make with another player, but the blitz you want to take with the strength seven Juggernaut piece, um, kind of figuring that out and how to get that working.
Yeah,
Interesting balance.
right. I would factor that back into the cost, right, of big guys. And that's why I really enjoy League Blood Bowl because you have, I don't know, any given game, you probably have 50 micro decisions, and some of those deeply impact the rest of the league for you, right?
Hmm.
And so I enjoy games where I feel like my decisions matter. And I know Blood Bowl is a game that has an incredible amount of variance involved. But I think just looking at the way seasons play out, you do feel rewarded for making the right call most of the time. Throwing those blocks, those greedy blocks with big guys is one of those. I will often say it out loud. I'm like, this is a greedy block, right? The intellectual plays to ignore this, put your touchdown in. But if I get this casualty, that's one step closer to the next skill on the big guy. And the thing about the way stats work in Blood Bowl is that if you have giant base stats, the more skills you have, the more value you get from those skills. So that's why the big guys are just so tempting to make those greedy plays with because you just yeah I could get Juggernaut on this guy. Yeah, I could put if I'm playing one of the chaos teams, oh, we could get some mutations on this big guy. We'll let him go crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so you had to pick top top big guy, bottom big guy. Who you got on both ends of the spectrum? What's your scaling?
Mm. Okay, I do some of the big guys that I've got like an affinity for. I really have an affinity for the Croxagore because he's very fast. The thing about Lizardmen as a team is that they're more min-maxed than a lot of other teams, and so the Croxagore feels like a really min-maxed big guy. That's why I really enjoy him. So I really like the Croxagore. Bonehead is such like a it's one that you can definitely navigate around, and Prehensile Tail is so good for against those tricky teams. I would probably put Croxagore towards the top, and I've been enjoying the Bloodspawn, but I got to get through a whole season before I can give you like the full status report on the Bloodspawn. I do think that Trolls are my least favorite big guy to play with, but I do respect them as players on the pitch, mostly because of the cost of them. But I do think they are the worst big guys. Just they're just the they're just so unreliable. And uh, I would love to know if anybody in our league has ever actually used projectile vomit as a skill on a troll. I don't know that anybody has, not that I've seen.
Yeah, I think there was a point in a game where I thought my opponent should have used it. Um, I think it's obviously Doors have a lot of block. Like it was a, I think there was a chance it was better um, to try to vomit a dwarf down. But yeah, I don't think I've seen it either. My my spectrum, I guess I'm kind of biased a little bit. I'm gonna say that the low end for me is the rot spawn. Um, Tentacles is really good,
But really
and
stupid on that piece. It's
really, yeah,
just
really stupid hurts. I think just too much. And I think it is a aspect that I carry over for most of the Nurgle team is that the skills you get out of the box with that team are things you would love to have later in a developmental stage. But to start off, it's not the most helpful.
and stats are really bad.
Yes.
Right. That's the thing about Nurgle. I mean, we could go on a podcast about how badly Nurgle got treated in this rules edition. But yeah, I know what you mean about the rot spawn. Um, it seems like an imposing piece, but it gets itself into trouble because of really stupid.
Yeah, and like tentacles is nice. I think a lot of people can kind of get into that thing. Like if you hit tentacles at the right time, you'll be like, "This is the best piece I've ever played, put on the pitch in a Blood Bowl game." But you don't think about all the times where you just never roll it and not actually lost you a game because you were relying on it. But yeah, I think my top end, I definitely do feel like the Croc score is up there. For me, I think it's close with the Croc score and the Rat Ogre. I think they're both really strong, but I value Bonehead a little bit over Animal Savagery just because of the static. Like you just need a two. It does not matter what you were doing, as long as you roll a two, you're fine. And that extra point of armor on a big guy
Yeah,
is a
that
huge point.
right. That's my big concern with the nine armor big guys, the Bloodspawn, Minotaur, and Rat Ogre, is that they are very fragile for how powerful the piece is. So they can end up really getting themselves into trouble. And the combination of frenzy and nine armor will often mean that a careless player will put their model in a place where it's going to get knocked over and fouled. And it's so easy to take a nine armor piece off the pitch with fouls.
Yeah, yeah, those are a little spotlight segment on big guys, and also sounds like we've got two more potential episodes in the works about Bloodlust and Nurgle. I could definitely rant about Nurgle for
Yeah, nobody's
multiple
playing. So
episodes.
nobody's playing vampires this season. Otherwise, I would give you Nathan's rambling thoughts on vampires as a team. We might have to save that for some future season where somebody else is playing vampires. Because I think vampires are kind of like a flashpoint in the game right now. Like a lot of people think they are really bad, but if you have played against really good vampire players, you understand that the team is crazy powerful.
Mhm. Oh yeah. Looking ahead, our little last tidbit, we're going to focus on week 4. Looking at the standings after week 3, it is still the trends have continued. Dead Man's Hand division is very compact due to all those draws that happened. So it's still everyone's game
Yeah.
to kind of get their place solidified in the standings. Um, we had a couple 7 pointers, couple 6 pointers, couple 5 pointers. So plenty of room. So a lot of games to be played. Snake Eyes is stratifying out much more cleanly.
Yeah, and the games this season or the games this past week for Snake Eyes uh kind of salvaged some players from the stratification that they were in. there are a lot of players who could upward trend from here. But yeah, the battle lines are kind of like drawn across that division. We don't have any games in the upcoming week between undefeated people in Snake Eyes. Both of the players, Jim and David, are both playing against teams. They're playing against other teams, right? At some point during the season, they'll square off against each other, but right now they're playing against other teams. And Jim is playing against the Zero Luck Chucks, which is an interesting one because if the Dark Elves can win that one, then they go to 3-1, and the Necro are at 3-1. Henderson is playing against the Slee Stacks, and Jeremy started the season 0-3. Henderson is 3-0. So, like just looking at the numbers, you think Henderson might walk away from that one. We'll see if Jeremy can put up a fight this time. But yeah, I mean, Henderson's. It feels like a green light for him to be 4-0 in this week.
We can only pray for the skink casualty streak to restart.
Yeah,
Maybe we can finish the
A's
season.
with casualties. One.
Yeah. Diamond Division, we've got our Dark Elf teams both facing against each other, Teal Terror and Parceros Nocturnus.
Yeah, and but both of those teams are looking for wins at
Hmm.
this point. And I do think Maria's got more experience with Dark Elves than Barbie, so I would say Maria's probably going to have this game. But I don't know that Maria has been rolling lights out this season. So any number of things could go wrong in that game, and the script could be flipped.
Yeah. Yeah, one upside looking at the rosters, Parceros Nocturnus does have a couple players with dodge. Also got their first runner. So that could give a little bit of an aspect where, that dump off can mess with you in your calculations if you're not cared for where the ball could end up and you try to blitz the ball carrier. That can lead to uh, Dark Elves just kind of scoring out of nowhere, and you're left tackling someone who has the ball but doesn't have it.
Right. Right, yeah. No, Barbie's several games that she's played so far, she hasn't really like put up like crazy SPP totals. So she's probably at a skill deficit headed into that game.
Mhm.
And that's always you can overcome that with like solid play and a decent amount of luck, but really at the end of the day, like how the teams match up on paper matters a whole lot before you even start rolling dice.
Yeah, and especially since it's both the same team, the team values are super close to each other. So it's not like you're going to be able to make up for a skill deficit with a lot of inducements.
Yeah.
It's a very tight game.
And elf teams don't have the cheap inducements that Skaven orcs do, right? You can't just take like a bomber. Not even that bombers are even good against elf teams because they've got way better agility and solid armor totals. But yeah, you don't have one of those really cheap inducement players. There's not even like a Rodney Roach bait that you can take, right? Like Acorn is the one of the cheapest stars that you can take on an elf team. That's one of the things about managing an elf team over the season is that you're not really likely to be able to take any star players because your players are so expensive and the stars themselves are so expensive.
Okay. Yep. Next matchup in that division is my game. Dorse going up against the Ogres, a return to Monkey. Um, this is a matchup that I am interested definitely in playing. I played against Ogres once with Dwarf team in the preseason of last season. Um, I am thankful to have this game before any of the Ogres have block. Uh, so looking forward to that at least as much as I could be looking forward to a game with a bunch of Strength 5 Mighty Blow pieces.
Yeah, Sean has often talked about how when he plays ogres, he despises the dwarf linemen because they take all the fun out of hitting models. Having 10 armor and block means you spend a disproportionate amount of time hitting the player, and they just don't go anywhere. They just get right back up, and they got thick skull. So like sometimes when you break armor, they don't even get off the pitch. They just sit right there. They can just stand back up in a couple of turns, and your ogre's got to hit them again. I do think it's a good matchup for dwarves on paper, right? Because you can match your 70k dwarf lineman against a 140k ogre, and then you've got dwarves left over that can go after noblars.
Mhm.
And dwarves are the natural predator of snotlings and noblars. And so you can end up racking up some SPP by blitzing noblars every turn.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what the team difference is here because I know Sean's like adapted his ogre game plan to make sure that he can always take some star players. Cindy is good in this matchup. Cindy is good both versus ogres or versus dwarves.
Mhm.
So, Cindy is a really cheap piece that can do some damage. Obviously, ogres love being able to take Griff if they can manage it because he just makes scoring with the team so much easier.
Yep. Current inducements that showing on Turfway is plus 145 for the owners.
Okay, yes, not enough for like a wizard. A wizard is another way for ogres to like effectively get a second blitz in a turn, right? That's the thing about bombers is that they can function as a blitz, sort of, that lets you open up a little bit more options about what to hit on the opposing team because your ogres aren't incredibly mobile to begin with.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely decking. We're planning on having it on Friday, so
Okay,
that'll be a matchup. It'll be interesting to see. Ogres are decidedly not trolls, but troll slayers might go after them just as well.
yeah.
Hopefully,
Every time a troll slayer levels up in Blood Bowl, they should be given a different title.
Mhm.
The way it works in the Warhammer Fantasy lore. That's the way it
Mhm.
works. Is like after you go fight and kill one of those things, you fail to die versus it. So you got to update to the next level.
Got Up Salesman, Halfling Justice, Black Orcs versus Halflings. Could be could be an interesting game just with the uh, bruiser linemen of goblins running around facing off against halflings.
Yeah. So Black Orcs, funny enough, are actually better against Underworld because grab negates sidestep. So this is one of those funny situations where Jurgen would be in better shape if he were playing against a better team. But the Blackworks don't really match up well into halflings. Now, Jurgen is an incredibly good positional player, right? The actual board position of where models go. Jurgen is incredibly tight. He puts models exactly where he wants them. He puts them in the most disruptive places often. And so I could see that um, being difficult for the halflings to overcome. But I do think he's at just like a massive disadvantage, skills and mobility wise. Um, and I don't know that he's got a good game plan if Wayne takes Griff, other than finding a way to knock Griff down and fouling him.
Mhm. Yeah, will be interesting. We got the Book of Grudges versus the GGs. Electric City, that Chaos Dwarf team has all its positional back. It was down a Bull Centaur last week. Got it back now. Got the Minotaur. Does have a Flamesmith on the team. So,
I heard the report that the first time the Flamesmith went to breathe fire, he rolled a one and blew himself up. So,
I guess early impressions, not so great
yeah,
with the Flames.
not amazing.
Be an interesting one. Just needs a little bit of a bounce back after two draws and a loss. So, could be could be a bounce back game for him. Could be a continued upswing for the
Yeah,
Castorf
I
team.
chatted with Chris a little bit, and so I don't know that Chris has played humans before, but he actually, I was telling him I didn't. The first time I played humans, I underestimated how important human catcher is. Right now, Chris didn't. Up to this point, Chris hadn't had a human catcher on the team, and so he was like, I'm kind of coming to that same conclusion right about now. I'm really wishing I had a catcher because that's like a way to get some touchdowns.
Mhm.
The human catcher is a crazy slippery piece. In Chaos Doors, they don't have tackle anymore. So like taking a catcher into that matchup has got to feel a lot better. Sure, it might get three dice by a bull centaur, but the being able to score is really important. You just got to establish how you're gonna actually put points on the board. And so yeah, I'll be interested to see how Chris plays it from here.
Yeah, I mean, bull centaurs do have to sink their uh, pushes every once in a while.
Right,
So,
they will, they will.
we got the V Stars. What else versus the Showing Undead of the Jolly Rotters? We do have one of these players who has been doing a lot of trash talking.
From what we've heard, yeah. And you left Mike's team in a really bad shape for this game for him. Like you didn't really do Mike any favors playing him last week. So Mike is gonna get some inducements. The Wood Elves can't do anything like too crazy, but they'll get some inducements, and that might be able to, might be able to give them a bit of an edge. But they're coming into this game, I think, way behind skills wise, stats wise, all that stuff. I think the Woodalls are in a bad way headed into that game. So
Yeah, it's hard to feel remorseful about putting casters on a team,
yeah, I know, I know.
but if I had to feel some sort of remorse, it would be taking out the thrower for the team. We talked about it last week with Chase's Elven Union team. Losing the thrower does really put a damper on a dynamic aspect of an Alpha team where you're able to get like good passes off. The rest of the team, I think, is like four passing, I
Yeah,
believe.
the I believe linemen and Wood Elves are four up. And I think Mike's team at this point is just linemen and Wood Elves, and he's going to get a bunch of journeymen. And the nice thing about the way journeymen work is that those are players that can die. You won't have to feel any kind of remorse. Um, and it helps you get out of that injury spiral. I mean, if you may not believe this, but there was a point in time where Blood Bowl did not have journeymen, and if you walked into a game with eight players, you had to field eight players. So now that it's been that way for more than like 20 years at this point, but I love journeyman as a catch-up mechanic. So Mike's really going to need it in this situation.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully, we get some word answer heroics. There's
It's a
one player that can single-handedly carry a game.
it's a word
It's a
answer
word
for
answer.
sure, for sure.
Right. Last matchup of this division, we got the Imperial City Ratainers versus the Might of Asgard. North's team gets all those positionals back that they were missing as humans. Retainers picked up a couple skills last week from that halfling matchup and are feeling pretty confident, uh, limiting Griff to one touchdown.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Fred, he was in here chatting about his game plan, asking us for some advice. So we were trying to give him the knowledge to help him succeed against Austin here. Austin's got a little bit of momentum off that last game. I know he was your dark horse pick for the division, but he's got like getting a little momentum helps, right?
mhm.
Um, I think you were kind of expecting maybe that to happen slightly earlier in the division, but another win here that would build quite a bit of momentum for Austin.
Yep. And chance to play, still playing against Haven, like lower armor value, you have a chance to get some SPP. Getting skills on those Ulf Runners, that's going to be important. The faster you get that, somebody who's played Norse,
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
attest to the
The
importance of
Elf
skills.
Warners, if the Yeti hadn't performed so cataclysmically bad for me in the season, the Elf Warners were players that were on my shit list. And I would have definitely complained more about them in the long term. But the Yeti was the player on the team who drew most of my ire.
Heading over to Snake Eyes, we got Dodge This versus TBD. Blackrock's looking to beat up some more skeletal
Yeah,
figures.
it's quite a bit of undead in this division. Um, he's already gotten one win over Tomb Kings. Now, Shambling is definitely a better team than Tomb Kings, and so if they can score points, so I'm interested to see how Nate navigates this. So,
Yeah, both coaches have been pretty strong from a defensive standpoint so far this season. So yeah, it's going to come down to can like a goal break away? Can the Orcs just like have their way and maybe rack up some casualties? It could go either way. It could definitely, I think, it could be like it might be a 1-0 game, but it could have just been a bloodbath in between. It might not show up.
yeah.
So your game is next on our docket: the ROUS versus Slaughterhouse 11.
Yeah, and now the last two times I've played Juan, he's beaten me, and they were playoff games. So those losses really sting. However, this is a classic. This is a classic. Juan's got you right where he wants you with his team battered, beaten up, the underdog going into the game. This is the type of game where Juan wins those. And so I'm not expecting, I would be happy with a draw out of this game. It's just so hard to keep Skaven from scoring. And I can't roll casualties. It'd be different story. If I was walking into this game with like 10 casualties, I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna wipe the floor with these stupid rats. But the way I've rolled casualties, I'm not convinced that I'm gonna hurt any of Juan's players. So
Mm. So just looking my preview of the game, I was looking at it. So it looks like both teams are going to be at 11 exactly going into this game. Do you feel like that has any bearing on how you view an advantage?
Swan's got an apothecary and I do not. And I've got some money in the treasury, but if I take anything, that will let him take bomber. And I hate playing against bombers. I don't even like recording this on a podcast because then it'll exist forever. So, like in 7 years, if I win Chaos Cup because took a bomber on my roster or something like that, it'll always look like an idiot because of my strong anti-bomber stance. But yeah, I do think casualties will go a long way in that game. I'm just not confident that I can actually roll any.
Okay. Next answer, we talked a little bit about Electric Signal versus the Slee stacks. To me, the interesting part of this game is going to be the inducements. As it currently sits, Jeremy's looking at 230,000
Jeez,
in inducements that he can take. So
jeez, bro,
you've got your Lizard Ben team. You've got 230K to spend. What are you
you are
taking?
taking dribble and drool. Let me tell you, um, they dribble and drool. I can confidently say are broken. After playing with them on Amazon's, dribble and drool are just insane. They're crazy players. If you've got the chance to use them on Lizardmen or Amazon, you should for sure. So they do take a little bit of practice and they are very fragile. However, they are just a disgusting threat. The fouling game that Dribble brings is so potent. The It's effectively dirty player plus two, sorta. And you can't underrate the stabbing either. Now, I don't think the stabbing is particularly good into Chaos Renegades because they don't have low armor targets. But if you were playing against like an undead team, I have stabbed a lot of ghouls in tournament play because you can cage dive on like a 3 up with a reroll and then take your 8 armor crack at a stab to just pop the ball loose. One of the big things when you're playing against some of the bashier teams is that they actually don't want to spend time picking up the ball if they can help it, because that's where a good chunk of the rerolls are going to go towards, is actually doing anything with the ball. And so being able to pop the ball loose on a stab is pretty cool. Now, that shouldn't be your first go to, right? If you're using dribble and drool, your first go to should be what's the highest value piece that I can knock on the ground and foul a crap out of, and then try to keep dribble and drool safe for that duration. And you foul with dribble until he's kicked out of the game. And but you'll be surprised how many pieces he'll take off the pitch before he gets caught.
Okay, well, no love for Anqi Panqi at this point.
Yeah, until something happens to dribble and drool, they're just way too powerful at 190.
Mm, that is totally fair. I can see that. Being after playing like one tournament with them, I can agree. It is
They're disgusting.
pretty powerful. We got the Southern California Children versus the Blood Moon Gang.
Yeah, I think Elvin Union is probably going to win this one.
Mm. I think the biggest one is the enticing factor to me for the Goblin team is having a chainsaw versus Armor 8 and 9.
Yeah, chainsaws go crazy against elf teams. You still got to protect your guy. The thing about playing an elf team into the dirty tricks is that you usually have enough mobility. Like I think I did. I think I played a game where I did a war dancer leap so that I could go blitz bomber, right? So taking those plays to go hit the dirty tricks so that they can't use them on you. That's the stuff that I think elves are pretty good at doing, that some of the other teams can't necessarily pull off.
Other matchup, we got Plague of Gods versus Gnarly Oaks.
Uh
Interesting.
yeah. Should be a low scoring affair. The old world is badly outstrengthed in this matchup, but you do have Dauntless at least. That can help. It's not perfect,
Mm.
but it can help. You got a Tree Man. If Tree Man ties up a mummy, that's pretty good for you. And Old World, not bad at like taking a beating. So you got more speed, and that's like the thing that I think drives Tomb Kings crazy is being able to actually put touchdowns on the table. And so the Gnarly Oaks can at least do that between the human catcher and a thrower.
Yeah, I think similarly to me for the matchup we were talking with Jim's Necromantic Horror team having low density of scoring threats. I think the Tomb King team also kind of has that issue. You have a
It's
blitzer
even
and a
worse on Tomb
thrower,
Kings. Yeah, it's like
and
way worse on Tomb Kings.
it's you've got agility 4 is your as good as it gets.
Now, Ness did take Cheney in the last matchup. Um, I don't. It doesn't look like Cheney really got anything done in the game, but Cheney is a legitimate scoring threat. He's 8 speed, 3 agility, and has catch. So if Cheney is in a place where your passer can air it out to him, um, then you can kind of get a surprise touchdown out of nowhere. Cheney at least gives you an option to score points that didn't really exist elsewhere on the team, not like on the roster of the team.
Yep. Looking at Sean's roster, he does have a couple of halflings. There could be a chance, get someone on the ground, foul them, hope to kind of
Those
equalize that way.
those halflings are there on the team to foul, and you've got the one turn score option at the very least. Like like late game, you need a score to tie up and stuff like that. You have the option to throw a halfling, but those halflings are there to there to foul. That's what they're there for.
Another thing, looking at Sean's roster, he does have a lineman with kick,
Yeah,
so that
that's
could,
really good actually versus Kimry. Very good versus Kimry.
yeah, that'll be. You're going to see he can really dictate. Talking, with some of the other matches about positioning and how important having strong positional play is. Like having a kick, being able to dictate where the scrum is going to happen for a player with really solid fundamentals and really solid play like Sean is going to be strongly in his favor.
Yeah, you dump the ball in the back like quadrant of the pitch. The thrower's got to like spend all his movement to get out there, and then the whole rest of the team is trapped at the line. And there's a good chance that the team's still trapped at the line on the second turn. And then you've got stuff like the human blitzer and the human catcher that can leg it out down the field, and then kind of get into like a one v two situation in the backfield, and then you might be able to knock the ball loose and go score. You might be able to get one of those fast fast touchdowns on defense that are really devastating. That kind of like they can kill the momentum of a game for sure.
Last Snake Eyes matchup, we've got Badman Rising and Zero Luck Shucks. Yeah,
Yep.
it's that's going to be 5 wins between both coaches.
Yeah.
Each playing for a potential lead of the division.
Yeah, I think that's probably the match of the week if we had to guess in this division. Um, Coop is kind of still in a meme territory with no rerolls, but his roster is stacked at this point.
Yeah.
So, um, I'd like a tackle strip ball that he got for free, not free, but for very little investment, is actually really good into Necro.
Mhm.
That's like the perfect model to hit a ghoul with.
Yeah.
Tackle strip ball, like
Mhm.
just give me the ball.
Yep.
That's where Necro suffers, is if they're having to like constantly try to pick up the ball. So Coop's got a piece that will do a lot of work if given a chance.
Yep. In addition to that, he still has that blitzer that is block, tackle, dodge.
Yep.
So he's got his skills are good. He's got like his strategy has paying off for the most part.
Yep. Yeah.
So
Right. And I think early in the season is when it will pay off. I think down the stretch is um where it'll feel a little silly, possibly.
yeah. So I guess if you had to play him at a point when if you could choose where you wanted that game, I think this is probably a week where you would want it,
Yeah.
where the ghoul werewolf don't have like skills yet. You avoided the monster werewolf
Yeah.
in week 2. Your players have plenty of skills. You got that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Strip ball tackle lineman.
this is not a bad time to catch Jim, and I'm sure the way my luck runs, I'll end up playing Jim as like the final game of the season, and he'll have two monster werewolves and fully fleshed out ghouls and block mighty blow guard flesh golems and guard mighty blow tackle wraiths, and I'll be like just rolling my eyes the whole time during the game of how good he had it during the season. Where by that point in the season, my blood spawn will have rolled his 16th double skull. So
Yeah. So our interdivisional game this week actually was already played. So we're not going to give you spoilers on that. But if you had no prior knowledge
yeah,
of how that game
if I
went,
didn't have perfect knowledge of what happened in the game,
yeah, we're not going to sit here and pretend like we predicted exactly what happened.
yeah,
But
it's tempting.
yeah,
It's tempting to pretend like that the Amazon player is going to score X number of casualties and get X touchdowns when the gnome player will also get Y touchdowns and Z casualties. But
yeah,
yeah, I think I've got to give it to Amazons in that matchup just because the gnomes don't have the skills that it takes to get Amazons off the table at
mhm,
this point.
yeah,
You can get some 3-die blocks with trees. That's your best chance to put some stuff down. Will did have block going into the game, and so that certainly helps. Block is really good versus Amazons until they all get block.
mhm,
But block is extremely useful against especially Amazon line women to try to get some of those off the pitch.
mhm,
Amazons are a team that can do a lot with very few models. Um, and so you have to do some really devastating numbers of damage to the team to keep them from functioning. Like 10 Amazons on defense don't function necessarily at like 91% efficiency. They're still functioning at like 97% efficiency. And then 9 Amazons on defense are still functioning at like 93% efficiency instead of like 85%. It's one of those things where like the team just does better than its model count suggests because of the mobility.
mhm. Yeah. I think obviously like one of the big draws to the gnome roster is the gnomes having wrestle and jump up. But when you're facing against two pieces that have jump up that are faster than you,
Yeah.
it's a little more daunting. Um, Especially, I'm very biased towards piranhas. I really like the piranha blisters, and so
Yeah. Like I could see two Blood Bowl players uh like agreeing on 98% of the game, but then just getting an absolute fist fight over which is better, the Piranha or the Jaguar Warrior on the team, right? Like just
mhm,
knock down, drag out, brawl. Which of these models is actually better? And I think both people are right. Like
yeah,
Jaguars and Piranhas are just disgusting players,
yeah, yeah,
especially once they start getting skills in a league.
mm, yeah. So yeah, well, like I said, you'll get more of a recap on that game next week for the fifth episode. Uh, but that's pretty much all I had this week. Any
Yep.
parting thoughts as we go into week four, going into like the second quarter of the season?
Yeah, I'm this season feels probably like one of the tightest seasons that we've played yet, as far as, and I kind of mentioned that last time, where like even people who are 0 and 3 at this point in the league, they can turn it around and still make the playoffs, right? And even if you're playing against like an 0 and 3 player, like there's a chance they just kill somebody important on your team, right? Nothing is safe. It does feel like players, they're not giving SPP away anymore, and you can be set up right now in the season, and there's still plenty of time for stuff to go wrong because this is Blood Bowl.
Yeah, well, hope you enjoy the show. If wherever you're listening to this, give us a follow, give us a like, leave a comment. We're open to mailbag type comments. If you've got things you want us to talk about on the next episode, we can definitely do that. Would also definitely recommend checking out the Substack. We're gonna have some more posts going up there. We'll have match reports from Fred, our sideline reporter with the Imperial City Retainers, kind of documenting their journey through the league. But we'll also get some other match reports up there, some other types of content. Make sure you're following us at all those different places. Really appreciate you listening. We'll catch you next time.
All right, goodbye, everybody.